Hey, everybody. Good evening. This is Wesley Cable from Obsessed with Wine. Welcome again to another episode. It's Friday night, so that means we've got another great interview for you. And tonight, like I say this every week, but I'm super excited about tonight's guest. We're going to learn a lot, and I'm super excited. I got a lot of things to talk about. So, tonight's guest is Aaron Benson, and Aaron is currently a wine educator in Napa. He's also a sommelier and he's worked in restaurants. And he has probably one of the coolest wine stories that I've heard. And so I can't wait to talk to him about it. And he's been gracious enough to walk me through a blind wine tasting, kind of the steps of where to start and kind of take me through the whole process. So hopefully that's something that you can participate in and maybe learn something from. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in Aaron right now. Aaron, good evening. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining me. I was just saying in the opening here, and we were talking a little bit before we came on, that you've done everything it seems like in the wine business, from restaurants to working at the winery to educating like you do now. It's like a wine lover's dream. It seems like to me. It's to me it sounds like the perfect life.
It's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you talk wine all day long, so I appreciate you spending some extra time with us and to talk about what's going on with you and what you're doing. So,
Yeah, my pleasure.
let's just get started with at the just the very beginning. So for you, um, you know, where did you grow up? Where'd you get the wine bug? Like, how did this all happen for you? And everybody's situation's different.
So I grew up in Texas. I spent most of my childhood in the Amarillo area in the Panhandle, and then in high school attended Mount Pleasant High School, which is a couple hours east of Dallas, and I did a couple of years of community college there on a theater scholarship, which actually I give a lot of credit to. I don't think I could have done the restaurant thing without that experience, so it mattered. And then transferred to the University of North Texas at Denton, and went for an English degree, not with any particular plans in mind. I just had some AP credits I could use, and uh, got all the way to graduation before I really had an idea of what I was interested in doing. But I was working in restaurants most of that time, waiting tables, and had developed a little bit more of an interest in wine and in beer and in whiskey and cocktails as well. And I still, I ultimately decided I thought I would go to law school. Because I had a certain lifestyle in mind. I wanted to travel and eat in nice restaurants and have the wine experience and all that. And I wanted to be able to afford it. And the pardon, we have somebody walk by in the background.
Oh, that's okay. No
um,
problem.
so, but going back to my time in a little town in East Texas, I never really had a plan for what I wanted to do. I just knew what sort of person I wanted to be and what sort of life I wanted to have, and I wanted to be worldly, and I imagined myself like having a library with a fireplace in it and wearing jackets with elbow patches and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
so wine kind of emerged as an interesting pathway to that, but it actually kind of was in the backseat at first to restaurants. When I graduated college, I moved into Dallas and started working in a fine dining restaurant, and preparing to try to get into law school. And this restaurant, the menu changed twice daily. I was getting inundated with information about food. This was when Food Network was still cool, so it was like Bourdain and Andrew Zimmern and all those people were on there, and I was watching it all the time and reading all their books and everything, and worked through a couple of fine dining restaurants before I ended up basically abandoning the law school idea because I had kind of just wanted to see where this new fine dining, food, and wine career path might go. And I ended up on the opening team at the Ritz-Carlton in Dallas at a restaurant called Fearings. And that was the first time I worked with a sommelier. And his name is Paul Bottomer. He's still there to this day. He's very well respected in the industry. And he's just a giant of a man in multiple ways. But I think what really kind of clinched it for me was that I would watch him, work with these very wealthy, clients that had certain expectations of what their experience would be like. And of course, he would execute on that flawlessly. He'd be opening them a really nice Bordeaux or something, and he would go through all the motions perfectly. And then he would turn around and, there'd be a couple who was having their first date since their baby was born or something, that had bought a modest bottle of wine, and he would just fawn over them and style them out. And watching how important that was to him to not only share his passion with them, but also to make them feel that comfortable and to make that memory that special for them. Kind of gave me a new way of seeing it. And so I kind of decided to go down that path and became one of a few people that got together and practiced tastings and formed what is still, I believe, going, called the Dallas Sommelier Society, that has seen countless people at this point get through the exams and has just really been an awesome source of structure and stability and resources for people on the path. And from there, I just have had luck. I worked in some amazing places and had some amazing opportunities. And, I really tried hard to get every travel opportunity I could. So I was in California once or twice a year, or Oregon or Washington. And kind of came to a point where I worked my way up to beverage director type positions, and I loved opening restaurants in particular, because I loved the creative process and because I loved educating the staff, especially. And
When you say opening new restaurants, do you mean like a new restaurant's opening up, and so you get to, I guess, you get to take part in creating kind of that initial atmosphere and everything, I guess, huh?
yeah, to an extent, and it depends on the restaurant, but I worked in one place where I was contributing ideas to the menu that ended up being really well received and got us written up, and I worked at Fearings, where I kind of got to be in behind the scenes during the opening process, and worked with some really great managers that I learned a ton from. And then, I opened a concept that, I got to put a little bit of an imprint on, but that now has like 5 or 6 locations around the country and is wine centric. So it was just that sort of the genesis of these things that I found to be really fascinating, and it's a ton of work, but it was work that you got to do, at a computer, or, in a experimental bar, or, it was a little more autonomous and creative type of work. And eventually, I to be fully candid, like I struggled with depression and anxiety, and I came to realize as my career wound on that restaurants were not good for that. So I was kind of at a point where I was trying to figure out what the next thing was going to be. I was thinking about maybe opening my own wine bar back in Texas.
Yeah.
And then COVID happened. So my wife and I kind of took a step back and reoriented ourselves around our priorities in life. And we made the decision to come work Harvest as interns, and we lined up jobs, and That turned into buying a new car and a camping trailer and doing a 3-week national park road trip on the way out to California. And then I remember being at Yosemite and wading out into, I think they call it Mirror Lake, and turning around and looking at my wife and saying, are we moving here? And she was like, we bought a Subaru. What did you think we were doing? So, so we came and we worked our harvest internship. It was 2020, so it was a really interesting one with the fires and COVID and everything else. And then made the decision to go ahead and pack up and move. And we officially emptied our house of our belongings in Texas in February of 2021.
So I got to ask you, I got to go back to, you were talking about working in the restaurants. And for those, like, for me, I've never worked in a restaurant, but I know just from talking to people how crazy it is and, the hours and all of that stuff. I mean, it's just a unique lifestyle working in a restaurant like that, right? And beyond that, when you decided, okay, I'm going to pursue this, to be a sommelier, how did you decide, what program to go with and how did that all happen?
I, at the time, I wasn't really exposed to any of the other options. Paul Bottomer that I mentioned was kind of my, I kind of jokingly call him my wine dad. Like he was the wine world. I saw it through him and his experience and his approach. Through him and through Dean and through the types of clients that we would get at the restaurant there, famous chefs, famous sommeliers, and so on. And then being in Texas as well meant that we were, we had access to TexSom, the Texas Sommelier Conference, which is one of the biggest wine events in the world. And, every summer and springtime too, when they started doing an awards competition, Texas kind of felt like the capital of the wine world for, a few days a week. And, I was able to volunteer in the early years and then some years attend as an actual guest. And I just was very fortunate to have a lot of doors open to me that exposed me to the world of wine. And it was mostly through the court or things related to the Court of Master Sommeliers.
So is that the program you went through, Court of Master Sommeliers? Okay.
Yeah.
And how far did you get? I mean, I know there's different levels and all that stuff. So how far did you get through it?
So I'm a certified sommelier. I took it in 2011. So coming up on 12 years in that status. And I admittedly got a little lazy about it for a while. I did the Cicerone program, which is the beer equivalent. And then I was going to take the advanced exam, the third level sommelier exam, in the fall of 2019. And I took a new job that made that very difficult to prepare for.
Yeah.
And so I withdrew from the exam and planned to resubmit for the following year, but COVID happened. So I didn't end up going back down that path. And now that I'm here, I've had the chance to do Wine and Spirits Education Trust, which is, makes more sense for being on this side of the business. It's a little less consumed with the minutia of the wine world and with memorization and more about kind of a fundamental understanding of the business side of it rather than the service side of it.
So for you, just take us behind the curtain just for a minute in preparing for these tests. I mean, I've seen movies about it and I've seen lots of stuff. It seems like just this wild, like studying constantly. Like what is what do you have to go through to be successful in this program?
I think that there's a type of person that has a better chance at passing this exam or really any exam. You have to be somebody who can be very focused, very comfortable with sacrifice, because you're going to be spending pretty much all your time, particularly for the higher levels, preparing. You're going to be staring at shoe boxes full of flashcards, studying maps. You're going to be getting together with tasting groups, sometimes in person, sometimes like this, or over Zoom. And you're going to it's going to be hard to have fun for long periods of time, even though the subject is wine. And it can be very expensive, which is part of why it's really key to find a support system, because you can share your resources, and everybody might get exposed to different opportunities that can benefit the rest of the group. Um, so it's really about being dedicated, being focused, being able to stare at maps, memorize flashcards, meet with people online in the middle of the night, have other people that can kind of keep you on task and hold you accountable for yourself. I've just never been that sort of a studier. I have a knack for learning and retaining information, but I have a very short attention span. So it's tough, and it requires a pretty singular dedication that some people are capable of, and I'm not convinced I am, and not everybody would be.
So just to give me an idea, and everyone else, like how many hours a day, how many days a week, and like what's the hardest part about the testing? Is it the tasting? Is it the memorization of all the wine regions? Like what is it that's the most difficult?
So I think it's the tasting, for most people, and I can tell you that for me, what scared me the most about it was the fact that you are doing it in front of a panel of master sommeliers for the upper level exams. So
Yeah.
in the certified exam, I think it was two wines, and you had a piece of paper in front of you, and you got to kind of fill it out, and you were under a loose, time constraint, but is fairly low pressure. But in the advanced exam and in the master sommelier exam, you are sitting in front of a panel in some hotel breakout room of 3 or 4 master sommeliers, and you have an array of wines in front of you, and you have a timer, and you have to do everything out loud, stream of consciousness. So that was the trouble for me, was translating it from here to them in such a nerve-wracking situation. And I think that's a lot of people would say that's the hardest part for them, but that's definitely for me. Was the hardest part, was not just the tasting, but the fact that you're essentially on stage while you're doing it.
And these wines can be from anywhere in the world, right? Is that right? I mean, it could really be anywhere. So, do you remember your 2 wines?
I think I believe we had a Vouvray, a Chenin Blanc from France, and we had a Beaujolais, Gamay from France. I in fact called the white wine, I believe, correctly. The red wine, I described it very well, but then called it Malbec, I think, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And that's kind of the thing about it, is if you show your homework, there's a rubric for getting credits for like hitting all the points that you're supposed to hit.
Yeah.
Making sure that you didn't miss any particular observations, and not necessarily, or they're not saying, did they understand that, that this wine tastes specifically like damson plums and being cherries. They're saying, did they, mention red fruit characteristics, or did they say this is only blue fruit characteristics?
I see.
So there's a structure to what they're looking for, and you get partial credit for all the points that you hit, whether or not you're hitting them exactly right. And then there's sort of they're able to argue that you painted a great case for what you thought the wine was, even though you were wrong, and you did it, you weren't way off base. Like, they can kind of follow your reasoning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. So, all right, so let's talk about working in a restaurant as a sommelier. You did that for how long did you do that for?
Oh, man. So from the time I got my first promotion until COVID. So 11 years. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
let me ask you first, because you said earlier you have anxiety and that kind of stuff. I can't think of anything more being more anxious than being in front of customers at a restaurant who are looking to you for advice or to help them pick out a wine for whatever the occasion or whatever they're eating and all that stuff. So, I mean, if you can do that, it seems like you could do anything. I mean, what is that kind of experience like?
Well, it's if you're a beverage director, if you put the program together, then you will have already built an innate knowledge that's going to really help you in those situations, because there's nothing in your stable that you haven't tasted, that you didn't deliberately choose to
Yeah.
offer.
Hmm.
So that helps a lot. If you're working in a restaurant where you're like a junior sommelier and you did not make those decisions, then it's almost, the onus is more on you to familiarize yourself with what's on offer.
Hmm.
Um, but what I did figure out over time is that the vast majority of people that you talk to are talking about wine in relatively simple terms.
Yeah.
And, they, for example, I would hear words like spicy, bitter, astringent, you know, uh, all these different things that people would characterize wine as being. And then gradually I figured out they were pretty much all talking about tannins. And 9 times out of 10, when I was talking to a table, I was trying to suss out what their relationship with tannins was like and then
Okay.
go from there.
That makes sense.
And oftentimes, you can go to a table and say, Syrah is my favorite grape. And you could go to a table and they would say, I want a bold flavored red wine that's not too, bitter or whatever they're saying for tannins.
Yeah.
And that's going to pair with my pork chop and her filet mignon. And you say, perfect, we have a Syrah that you're going to love. And they go, oh no, we don't drink Syrah. And so you then kind of come back and bring them like a little, blind sampler, and inevitably they'll usually pick what you suggested in spite of themselves.
Yeah.
So what I figured out was there's a little bit of a dance to, like, I'm trying to think of a very diplomatic way to put it, of hearing them
Yeah.
professionally and
Hmm.
and communicating with them respectfully, while also sort of turning them back onto something that they might not know that they want.
Yeah.
And it can be eye opening for people when that does happen. And then what I learned from Paul is that you have to give them a context for that. You can't just be like, yeah, told you, bye.
Right.
You need to help them understand. Well, maybe in the past you've had Australian Shiraz and you thought that this wine was going to be like those, and that wasn't your cup of tea. But there's a lot of variety out there, and so it becomes kind of a combination of a sort of a give and take, while also kind of translating what they're saying in your mind without I don't know, giving it away, that you're kind of, I wouldn't say judging them, but
Yeah.
you're translating them, I think is the best way to put it.
So what are some of the some of the most important factors that you have to consider when you're trying to, help somebody select a wine? And I'm assuming these restaurants you've been in have huge wine select collections. I mean, there's almost unlimited choices. So how do what are some important factors in selecting a wine for a client? And how do you decide on from all of the choices that you have to choose from?
Okay. So I'll come back to that in a second. So the as far as kind of figuring out what to present to them, one of the sort of textbook moves that you would do is you would make 3 recommendations in 3 price points, and as you point to the wine on the list, you're telling them why you think it would be a good fit, and you're dragging your finger over to the price, so that you're showing them that without saying it out loud, in case they don't want their guests to hear their conversation.
Yeah.
So what I would typically do is I would I would try and build in one option that was like a pet thing to me, in addition to those. So, if I kind of, first of all, I'm asking them, what do you normally like to drink? What is everyone at the table ordering? And then I would come up with three recommendations. I might say, do you tend to like more earthy, old world style wines? Do you tend to like more fruity, new world style wines? And then I would flip through to those pages, show them my recommendations, and then try and add another one, and then be like, you know what, this is just sort of a passion project of mine. If you want to get a little bit into something new and try something that might be outside your comfort zone, I really think that you're going to enjoy it. It's really going to be rewarding to you. And so, if they're Napa Cabernet drinkers and they feel like they might want to explore European wines, then maybe I would point them towards something unconventional like Aglianico del Volturre or something like that. That's going to be a big, powerful, ripe wine,
Mm-hmm.
and give them kind of a safe entry point into new territory. So that was usually my move. Um, so as far as selecting the wines for the program, that's a complicated thing.
Yeah.
In a vacuum, I would love to say that say you're working in a restaurant that sustainability is a huge priority. Well, then sustainability needs to be the priority in your wines as well. You need to have
Mm-hmm.
that continuity. Um, you know, the worst thing that you can do is make a wine list that's just the geeky stuff that you like, unless you work in like a Michelin starred restaurant in New York City or something. Those
Yeah.
guys can get away with that, but in Dallas,
Mm-hmm.
Texas, it's not going to fly. So you have to find a comfort level um, with Napa Cabernet being a perfect example. I have I had sort of an ethos that I would wanted to support in Napa Cabernets, and that being wineries that were historically significant, that made balanced styles of wine, that were food friendly, that I don't know, treated their employees well, or were environmentally conscious, or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of have to frame all that against what your budget is, and how much you feel like you're going to be able to spend on a weekly basis. If you are told by your restaurant that you can have $500,000 in wine inventory, and you just go ahead and spend $500,000, and then they're like, well, you can't reorder anything for 6 weeks, then that wasn't
Oh,
the right direction to take.
yeah. Yeah.
So that's a big thing too. And then there are relationships that come into it as well. So you might, an individual, have a relationship with wineries, or with importers, or with brokers, or with distributors that you want to honor. And then your employer might have relationships with those entities too, that sometimes might not line up entirely with what you feel like you should be doing, and you just kind of have to swallow those pills, and do what's asked of you in that case.
Yeah.
But the beauty of it is that people are beating down the door to put their wines in front of you to taste. So you have endless opportunities to taste wines, which you can use to your advantage. There are essentially big tastings where you can go in and taste hundreds of wines sitting out on tables, with people standing behind those tables that are very well versed on them and capable of telling you all about them. And then of course you have your tasting group, your friends in the industry that you can geek out on stuff with,
Yeah.
and get in something before they do on your wine list, before they get the chance. So all kinds of factors involved, but relationships are really a big, big, big part of it.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you one more thing about the sommelier in the restaurant, and then I want to ask you about what you're doing now, obviously, on the more wine education side at the winery. So you mentioned price earlier, right?
Mhm.
So, like, how do you? I mean, I guess you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I mean, the price of the wines could be from, what, $75 to, you know, $5,000, right? I mean, like,
Mhm.
how do you know which direction to point people towards, a price, because obviously that's super important.
There's lots of little tells. Yeah, I mean, it's going to sound a little crass, but anybody in sales of any kind is would kind of say the same thing.
Yeah.
Um, the clothes people wear, what the car they showed up in, the watches. Like I'm a little bit of a watch guy, and I've
Okay.
learned how to spot that.
Mm-hmm.
It can be when you approach the table, what they're looking at on the wine list, what page they have it open to. And then whatever you're not able to glean from, before you even approach them, that's where those questions come in. Like, what do you like to drink? And can kind of pin it down from there. 9 times out of 10, you're dealing with people who are looking for a bottle that's going to over deliver and hopefully cost them under $100 on the wine
Yeah.
list.
Yeah.
Which I haven't done that since pre-COVID. I'm sure it's a little harder now than it was then.
Yeah.
To really fill out that niche of your wine list, but that's part of it becomes kind of easy because then you can just have things that you're passionate about that are in your back pocket that you have a great track record with that people always enjoy, and you can if you feel that they're not as invested in the wine experience too, then you might go with a brand that's more familiar, that it's probably more for their guests than it is for them. So there's all kinds of considerations that go into it.
So when you're a sommelier, right? Can you just enjoy a glass of wine on a Saturday? Like just get out a wine and just enjoy it? Or is it always about, picking out everything that you can taste or smell? Or, is it always like being a sommelier? Can you turn that off and just enjoy a wine?
Yeah, I think so. We my wife and I, like, we have certain things we like to drink at home. Like I can't keep bubbles in stock to save my life. Like that's,
Yeah.
we crush them. And white wines, especially, which, we kind of joke, we just want something that tastes like a rock with like lemonade rent, like splashed over it. And then we're happy.
Yeah.
I love what I call like crunchy red wines. You know, Longerosos, Barbera d'Astis, those kinds of things from Italy, wines from the Jura, from the Alpine parts of France, that you can throw in the fridge for a few minutes, that aren't complicated at all, are just delicious. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we drink wine all the time, way too much. Like my doctor is horrified. I'm sure all of our doctors here in Napa Valley are horrified because
I'm
you
sure
go
they
in and
are.
they're like, how
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
drinks do you have in a day? I'm like, I don't know, like 3 or 4 probably, I
Right.
guess.
Yeah.
We both brought home a half a bottle of wine, and we drank that, and then we opened another bottle of wine for dinner. What's the big deal,
Yeah.
And it's very much part of life, and it's especially living in Napa Valley, where everybody has virtually the same hobbies and interests. It's like social currency, and it's something that you bond over, and it's something that you look forward to the opportunity to share something you just discovered with your wine nerd pals.
Yeah.
It really is. I think most people that I know in the wine industry, whether they're sommeliers or on this end of the business, their lives revolve around wine, and it's
Yeah.
part of daily life.
So for those who are interested in being a sommelier, they're thinking maybe this interview just put them over the top. Like, all right, today's the day I'm going to do this, right? So what are some important skills that you should have or qualities to be successful at it?
I think you need to have patience. You need to go easy on yourself. You need to find other people. I can't stress enough how important that is, to not go it alone. It's there's so many resources out there nowadays with Reddit and all the different online outlets that you have
Yeah.
to meet other people in your area who have those interests. And the journey is going to be easier. It's going to be more comfortable. And frankly, it's going to be more enriching if you involve other people in it. And those are connections that will matter to you for life. I mean, the other day I was at work and I saw a guy that I recognized, and I kept thinking, oh, I must have taken care of him last time he was here. And then eventually realized he was a sommelier from Austin, and now he's a beverage director of a restaurant in San Francisco. We know each other, you know.
Wow. Yeah.
So the world gets very small,
Hmm.
um, and uh, and those connections that you make, the people that you meet on your trips or at conferences or whatever, become part of the fabric of your life. And so don't go it alone. I think is really the single most important thing that I could say. Like, do not try to go it alone because, first of all, it's going to be a lot harder and a lot more expensive. And second of all, you're going to kind of miss the point. The journey is the destination, and these things, and master sommeliers will tell you that too.
So you left the sommelier restaurant gig, you said, because of COVID. So obviously that changes a lot of things. And so what made you decide to do the internship? And I'm fascinated by that because I've done a few internships myself and I know what it's like. And I actually love doing it. So just a thought, coming from hospitality in the restaurant, going out and doing the internship. Why the internship, and what did you think of it? Was it everything that you thought it was going to be?
So we made the decision to do it. Basically, kind of how we got there was, it was COVID. We were in our house in Texas. We had spent the first couple of months. I mean, I was grilling everything over live fire in my backyard every day until my wife got tired of it, and then we were trying out new cocktails. We were putting puzzles together. We were scraping popcorn off the ceilings in the guest bedrooms. And then we had the opportunity through actually the Dallas Sommelier Society to do a virtual tasting with one of the great Argentine producers. And so we picked up a little flight of bottles and sat down in front of the computer, and we're having a chat very much like this with her. And she cuts to footage of the vineyards and the Andes Mountains behind them and these beautiful vineyards. And we're both stir crazy, and I just looked at my wife and said, "Do you want to work harvest?" And she said, "Yeah." So, but that wasn't the first time it had come up. We had always thought about doing it. She was really interested in getting in on the production side. And I had a friend who was based here who had told me at one point, if you ever decide to make the move, that you can come out and get a harvest internship, crash on a couch or an air mattress, or rent a room if you have to.
Hmm.
And you're going to be working yourself to death. And you'll stack away a little bit of money that'll buy you some time to look for a job when harvest is done, because you're gonna be working tons of overtime and you're not going to have time to spend it.
Yeah.
And so we had sort of internalized that bit of advice as well. And so that I think that was why my wife knew as soon as we decided to do it. She was like, "We're moving," and it took me a little bit longer to get there, but it was part of the thought process for sure. And as far as my like my experience, my expectations, 2020 was 2020, so it was kind of hard to say.
Yeah.
We got to the valley the first week of August, and I think we'd been here 2 or 3 days when the first of the 2020 fires broke out.
Hmm.
And so within a couple of days, we're waking up in the morning, and it was like Silent Hill outside. There's ash snowing on the cars, and
Hmm.
there was a day that everything was orange. It was kind of surreal, and I worked for Hudson Vineyards. I worked my internship at Hudson Vineyards, who make their own wines, which are fantastic, and then do some custom crushing for some really notable producers out here as well,
Hmm.
who buy fruit from the Hudsons and then in some cases make the wines there at their facility. And some of them were affected by the fires and had been evacuated. And so we ended up taking on a little more of their share of things. And we had a pretty small crop because there was a fair amount of smoke taint. We didn't make a lot of wine for Hudson anyway. It was very small production.
Hmm.
But one of the really interesting things about being there was that I got to see the winemaker, jumping on Zoom calls with other winemakers and talking about, here's what we're going to try. What are you guys trying? Comparing notes.
Hmm.
You got to see that, Hudson is primarily a grower for other wineries. And, everybody was trying to back out of making wine and file insurance claims and things like that. So I got to, kind of overhear some of that dialogue going on about the inner workings of the business.
Yeah.
So it was fascinating to see in real time how this crisis affected everybody, and to see the cumulative effects of COVID, of the fact that international workers' visas had been canceled in July. So a significant portion of the workforce wasn't going to show up.
Yeah.
And then you had the fires on top of the drought conditions, and so it was just kind of a nightmare vintage in a lot of ways. And then you could also feel, frankly, the trauma from 2017, from the fires that year, and how that kind of was hanging over everybody's heads like the smoke was.
Yeah.
So it was a fascinating experience to have to observe all those things and get those insights into the business. It ended up being, we worked 8-hour days. We were home at 3:30. We didn't have that much to do. My internship ended up being really short. It wasn't the 16 hours a day, 6 days a week for 2.5 months that I had come in expecting.
Yeah.
It was a lot of pressure washing and steaming barrels, and of course, climbing up inside the tanks and doing all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of small spaces, and I hate humidity. So you can guess how I felt about that. But I wouldn't trade the experience for the world. And it was one of those things that we had been talking about doing forever, and just kind of assumed that the opportunity was never really going to present itself. So it became a silver lining for us, and then it led to this transition to moving.
Yeah. So let's talk about, now your transition from, working in the restaurants to now working in the winery, educating, consumers on the wines and everything. So what are some of the what's the biggest difference between those two? Obviously, besides the obvious one of not being in the restaurant, but are they really similar as far as, what you have to do and what you have to know, or are they really a lot different?
I would say they're a lot different, but I found my knowledge base to be very useful, and especially my experience and training to be very useful. I have people that will come in and say, we've learned so much in this short time with you. Like, how did you get to be this wine authority?
Hmm.
And I tell them, I used to teach 22-year-olds how to sell Cabernet Sauvignon by the glass to people, and I learned a lot in that process. And I learned not only from education experiences that I got to have, where I got to see what other people did, but also by trial and error, learning not only how to get people interested and excited and engaged, but to frame information to them in a way that they could retain. And so I think that in that way, the restaurant experience was invaluable, because it taught me how to be a better wine educator. And I work at Joseph Phelps Vineyards. We have a whole bunch of different experiences that we offer.
Hmm.
We do some educational type tastings. We do kind of the standard format type tastings. We do an experience that's effectively it's a tasting that includes lunch, but it's a 5-course lunch paired with our wines that we try to execute on the same level that a Michelin-starred restaurant would. In the case of where I work, my experience played in it perfectly.
Hmm.
Um, there are a lot of people that I work with that have similar backgrounds to mine too. And that wouldn't be true for every winery. Some wineries, are a lot simpler in their approach
Yeah.
have a lot less moving parts. But I would say that where I work specifically, the restaurant experience was key. As far as where they differ, the hours, the culture. In restaurants, you're working, noon to midnight, maybe more than that, if you're in a salaried position, and your whole social life is whatever bar you can get to before it closes.
After
And
work.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's also kind of a younger man's game too. I think it's something that you kind of age out of eventually.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, so the pacing, the pressure, uh, the restaurant world is really sort of informed by everybody being spread too thin. Um, you know, you have to run with the smallest staff you can possible. A lot of times you're working with people who might not be as dependable and consistent as you would like, and you have to kind of cover for them. There's always something, and
Yeah.
that has not been my experience on the winery side, which has been fantastic. There are days where I remember early on being like, I don't know where my phone is, and being like, oh, I don't know where my phone is. What a luxury, like
Yeah.
um, leaving work at work. And I it's a very fulfilling and satisfying job. I don't know if I would never kind of get that itch to forge out into something different or more difficult or whatever. But I'm very content with it now, and it's been just a really fantastic lifestyle change for me.
So I can't think of a better place to work as a wine educator than in Napa. I mean, like you have your pretty much your choice of all kinds of world class places, and you've actually had the benefit of working at some really awesome, iconic places. So what are some of the other wineries that you've worked at? I know you're at Joseph Phelps now, but what are some of the other places that you worked at, and what were those experiences like?
My first tasting room job was at Corazon,
Hmm.
and Corazon those are some of my absolute favorite wines in California, in the U.S., and in the world. Kathy Corazon is one of several living legends that I've been lucky to get to know.
Yeah.
Her She's awesome. I did a dinner with her many years ago at Dallas Country Club. The first winery I ever tasted in was Corazon on my first trip to Napa Valley, and
Wow.
it's also a perspective that I'm really grateful for. They're very small. The odds are stacked against them in almost every way. And then Kathy is dedicated to making kind of an old school, bygone style of Napa wines that has gained her a following and a reputation, but doesn't quite bring the commercial success that another approach might bring.
Mm.
And I just respect the hell out of them for it.
Yeah.
They're just fantastic people.
Hmm.
Um, I also worked at Frog's Leap. I tell people all the time, if it were up to me, Frog's Leap would be everybody's first winery experience because they'll meet your expectations. I mean, it's a beautiful property with a working garden, and there's dogs running around, and there's a big red barn, and it's the wines are kind of old school as well.
Hmm.
They age beautifully. They're some of the best values in the Napa Valley. Um, old Frog Sleep Zinfandel is one of my favorite things, like 15-plus-year-old Zinfandel.
Hmm.
Um, and John Williams is another just legend.
Yeah.
He's such a fascinating guy, and he's so funny. My probably my favorite John interaction was I went to him at one point and said, I said, I keep hearing all these stories about different things that have happened to you in the past or things that you've been a part of, and I'm hearing conflicting versions of them, and I would love to sit down with you sometime and get the official version. And he kind of stopped and stood there for a second, and he goes, "No, we're not going to do that." And he said, "Just keep making it up." And he walked away.
Wow.
So, I love John, and I love everything about Frog Sleep. It wasn't the work fit for me that I hoped it would be,
Hmm.
but I still I tell people, I sing their praises all the time. I will fight to the death for Frog Sleep, and I love drinking their wines. And then I wound up at Joseph Phelps, coming up on a year now. In fact, the first week of August will be my 1 year anniversary with them.
Wow. So, can you give us maybe one of your most memorable experiences as an educator? Maybe with some clients or something like that. Can you think of something that would be interesting that you could share with us?
Yeah. Hmm.
The reason I ask this question is because I feel like I'd be a pretty good wine educator. I've never done it before, and hopefully that doesn't upset you because that's your career, and I feel like, oh, I could do that. But I mean, just the experiences that you have with people, just got to have a lot of memorable experiences. You know?
Yeah, I think that the best way I could answer is just the experience of establishing common ground with people from very different backgrounds,
Yeah.
and making that connection that wine facilitates with them. We have Korean pop stars come taste. We have I took care of a guy recently who got fed up with the tech world and decided to start his own watchdog about AI development. I
Cool.
just fascinating people with fascinating paths in their lives that wine has resonated with them, and I think that when with wine as a common denominator, there's a lot of things that you can kind of assume about a person, about their value systems, and what they want out of life, basically. The value of experience over just materialism and collecting. Like they're there because they feel the same feelings about it that I do.
Yeah.
And I know that's not the perfect answer, but I'm trying to think of one that wouldn't be kind of a negative thing. Like I've definitely,
Yeah.
there have been some stories,
Sure.
but I think one of the things that I've heard a few times that has meant a lot to me is that some of these people who are doctors or surgeons or educators or whatever, who have said to me, like, no one has ever helped me understand wine better than you just did. And so it's a tremendous compliment to be seen as an equal with people who are very successful in their lives, and to have something that you can connect to them about.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I could ask you 1,000 more questions because that's just the kind of guy I am, and I ask a lot of questions. But I want to do this wine tasting here, so
Okay.
I'm going to need your help, and I'm going to tell you ahead of time. I'm not good at this at all. So if you can help me pick out what this wine is, then you're really good at your job. Okay,
Wow.
because what I've got here is I've got a glass and I've got some red wine in my decanter here. I have no idea what it is. So can I just walk us through the process of doing a blind tasting, just to just to see how it goes.
Okay. I'm gonna keep it a little less rigid. So if
Yeah.
anybody else is out there watching that has done Court of Master Sommelier stuff and armchair critiquing me, they can hush. They can keep it to themselves.
Okay. Yeah.
Because, but basically, I mean, please go ahead and pour yourself a good couple of ounces. Not so much that you can't swirl it around the glass.
How's
That looks
this?
good. Yeah,
Okay.
perfect. So basically, the way that this thing works is it's the process of elimination. So right off the bat, we can eliminate that you have sparkling white or rosé wine in your glass. So
Okay. Yep.
all those are off the table.
Hmm.
And just from what I can see over the internet here, you have a very darkly colored wine. Of course, your black shirt is behind it, so I might be missing that. But yeah, really darkly colored wine that has almost a purpley tinge to it in the bubbles that have formed from pouring it.
Hmm.
Give that a swirl around the glass.
Okay.
Like get it as high up on the walls as you can. And then when you stop, um, how viscous is it? How slow is the wine creeping back down the glass?
It's not very slow.
It's not very slow, so it's going pretty quickly. Can
Yeah.
you see the color of the wine in the part that's creeping down the side of the glass, or is it clear?
It's already happened, so I can't
It's
see it
already
any
okay.
longer. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so you have a darkish, purplish tinted wine that is not sticking to the glass very strongly. So that suggests to me that it probably doesn't have residual sugar, and it is likely not as high in alcohol as some others might be. Typically, when the whole concept of legs, people think
Yeah.
that you swirl the wine and it just sticks to the glass, and that means it's better. It's actually that there are things more viscous than water, and alcohol and sugar are really the main two. So off the bat, we've already established that this is a red wine and that it is likely, of course, not guaranteed,
Sure.
likely to be dry and lower in alcohol.
So it's not going to be like a big Zin that's like 16% or anything in that range.
Um, I,
Or
I
we can't rule that out yet.
I wouldn't rule it out yet. I don't think
Okay.
so. I wouldn't rule it out yet.
Okay.
So
Cool.
so then, if you were like we already kind of glossed over it, but you would be looking for glass or sediment,
Okay.
or gas or sediment.
Okay.
So I'm guessing there's no bubbles in there to suggest that there might be any CO2 in the wine.
No.
And then there's no sediment, and I can also sort of tell by the color that this is a younger wine, right?
Yeah.
It's
Hmm.
not showing that kind of brick red tendency out towards the edges. That would suggest to me that it's older.
Uh-huh.
So that's all stuff we can learn before we even put our nose in the glass. So
Yeah.
give it another good swirl. Put your nose
Okay.
in the glass. It's important to take short, intense inhalations rather than long, drawn out ones. Your brain is going to eventually start to put information in the background that it doesn't think is important. So if you take short inhalations, then it kind of gets around that fail safe that your brain has. If
Okay.
at any point you start to feel like you're losing your perception of the aromas,
Yeah.
you can reset by smelling yourself. So the back of your hand, the sleeve of your shirt, your own aromas are neutral to you.
Oh.
So provided that you didn't use some like rose scented lotion on your hands or something, then that should
Yeah. A lot of cologne or something
yeah.
maybe.
But that
Yeah.
should give you sort of a reset point.
That does.
So
That works. That works really well.
yeah, so then you would right off the bat you want to establish if this wine is clean. So by that we would mean, does it seem to be flawed? Does it have cork taint or TCA,
Hmm.
which would be cardboard, wet newspaper, dank attic, that sort of thing? Does it have Brettanomyces, which usually smells kind of like animal smells? I'm from Texas, so the memory that I have tied to it is petting zoos at like state fairs.
Okay. Yeah.
So
I don't
other
get any
people
of
say,
that, thankfully.
Okay, perfect.
Hmm.
So, which would not necessarily mean that the wine is bad, but it would be something to note, and it would be a clue potentially to what the wine is.
Okay.
And then some other faults that might come up, if the wine is oxidized and just seems disjointed and smells like way more like dried fruit than you feel like it should, then that wouldn't be great. If the wine has kind of a nail polish remover, acetone smell to it, then that would suggest volatile acidity, which again isn't necessarily a bad thing. Some really famous Italian wines carry volatile acidity, sometimes Brunellos, but really mostly Amarones
Hmm.
will typically have that. And you're also paying attention to how much of a warming sensation you get in your nasal passage and at the back of your throat as you're smelling it. If you start to feel a warming sensation, then that would be alcohol vapor. That would suggest to you that maybe the wine is a little bit higher in alcohol also. And then the last thing I would say is on this part is open your lips a little bit. So you want to inhale primarily through your nose, but a little bit through your mouth too, because you're going to pull those aroma compounds to your retronasal system at the back of your throat, kind of behind your nasal passages. So
Okay.
if you can inhale through both at the same time, you're going to get a more complete picture of the aromas. So
Wow.
we've established that we think the wine is clean.
Hmm.
Uh, would you consider this wine to be really intensely aromatic, or is it more subtle?
I would no. It's definitely not intense. Definitely
Okay.
not. I mean, it's definitely there. The aromatics are there, but they're not overpowering or anything. And it's not. I don't have to try too hard to get some of that. So I would
Okay.
say maybe in the middle.
Kind of in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure you drink enough wine to know, like, you can think of it like, is it closer to like Pinot Noir, which is really about nuance and subtlety, or is it more like Australian Shiraz, which sometimes just explodes out of the glass? And that can
Hmm.
be kind of a spectrum that you can compare it to.
Okay.
And then we want to move to the aromas themselves. So, it's what you really want to do is just sort of take an inventory, smell it, be kind of stream of consciousness about it. Um, smell what it makes you think about, or say what it makes you think about when you smell it. Does it remind you of blueberries, cherries? Focus on fruit to start. And if you have a hard time with naming specific fruit, you can back up a step and go with, we would say, red, blue, or black fruit. So red
Okay.
fruits would be raspberry, strawberry, cranberry. Blue fruits would be most plums, blueberries. Black fruits would be black currants, blackberries, black cherries. And then of course it can be a little of all of that, or some combination of multiple. But try and tell me what fruits you feel like you smell in there.
Okay. I'm gonna start with red fruits. So I
Okay.
feel like I definitely feel like there's some cherry.
Okay.
Um, this is the hardest part for me though.
Yeah, you have to kind of cultivate it.
It's like
Doesn't come naturally to everybody.
I smell and then I'm trying to come up, what is it that I smell? And that's hard to do. I can't figure that
Yeah.
out. So, okay,
Well,
but so I
so smell is intensely tied to your memory. So if you have kind of like a gut feeling or like an image that flashes in your mind, or
yeah.
a nostalgia hit that comes from it, follow that, because that's going to help you connect to it.
Yeah, I would say like a red fruit for sure, definitely cherry, like almost like I don't know, candied cherries maybe or something
Okay.
like that,
Yep.
something of that. And I'm not like I don't get any black fruit, I don't get any blue fruit either out of this. It's almost
Okay.
like it's like a red fruit, whatever it is, that's what it's presenting to me. So
Okay. And you said candied, so you feel like it's on the riper side rather than like dried fruit.
definitely,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Are there any non-fruit things that you get from it? So examples could be violets, chocolate, black pepper, spices, any of those kinds of background things, mushrooms, all of which have a reason that they're there, but
Yeah.
can be really good hints to get you there. Coffee is a
Okay, so being honest, and I told you I'm not good at this. I don't get anything else. I don't get
okay.
anything like usually if there's like a oak influence that I can notice, like I can notice that I don't notice that here. I also don't pick out any of those other things that you were talking about, non-fruit
Okay.
related type of things. So now that may be me or it may be the wine. I don't know. So
Well,
it's
let's assume it's
probably me.
let's assume it's the wine. Let's
Okay.
ride that. So
Okay.
we would talk about the aromas in terms of primary, secondary, or tertiary. Primary are going to be derived entirely from grapes. Um, I like to use the example of Rotundan. So Rotundan exists in Syrah, Grenache, Petit Syrah, Zinfandel, a few other grapes, Gruner Veltliner, and Gewürztraminer on the white wine side. It is an organic compound that also is found in peppercorns and rose bushes. So when you smell a Syrah and you smell pepper, that's what you're picking up on. The vines use it to basically keep animals away until the seeds have fully developed. So that would be an example of primary. So anything fruity, anything floral, and then anything that might be natural to the grape itself would be considered primary.
Mhm.
There's also, certain influences that can be in the environment. So eucalyptus is a big one. If you have eucalyptus trees near your vineyard, you probably are going to pick that up in the wines. That would still be considered primary. Secondary would be typically associated with winemaking. So it would be mostly revolving around yeast. Sometimes that's a little more important in white wines than it is in red wines.
Okay.
And then tertiary would be associated with aging. So it would be the imprint of new oak on the wine, and then it
Mhm.
would be autolysis or essentially the decay of the yeast. It would be oxidation over time, so on and so forth. So those would all be tertiary. So all that to say that it sounds like the wine that you have is very primary,
Yeah.
and go with your gut on that. If you feel that the wine is very simple and primary, then that's probably what it is, and that's probably a good hint to what it might be as well. But
Okay.
if you were in an exam setting, you would have to come up with some other descriptions.
Okay. Yeah.
They would knock you for that.
Okay.
Just maybe stick your nose in the glass and just say whatever your brain farts out, like just whatever comes to you.
Hmm.
Transport yourself. Like imagine you're walking through Whole Foods or something. Like, is there anything that visually stands out to you when you smell this wine?
I hate to do this to you, but I don't. I
Can't do
can't
it.
come up with
Okay.
anything.
All
No.
right, that's fine. Do you you said that it's candied? Do you feel that it's raisiny at all, or do you think it's just bright and ripe and fresh?
I would say maybe a little bit of raisin,
Okay.
a little
Okay.
raisiny, maybe. Yeah.
And do you find the wine to have any earthy qualities? So
No.
dry, dusty earth, potting soil, nothing like that. Mushroom.
Mm-mm.
And then you said you're not really getting any oak influence on the
No, I'm
wine.
not. Mm-mm.
Okay, cool. So for the audience, if you were picking up on oak, it might be vanilla, it might be baking spices. In the case of American oak, it could be coconut or dill. Those are all derived from natural agents in the wood.
Mhm.
And then you may also have a toasted barrel in the picture, which would caramelize the sugars in the wood, and then you would end up with other flavors associated with caramelization. So, chocolate, tobacco, coffee being good examples. All right, so let's go with the assumption that this is a young,
Mhm.
fruity wine that is in a primary stage. It is likely New World. It doesn't have a lot of oak influence. It's
Right.
not standing out as very high in oak.
Mm-mm.
And we know that it's a very dark color. And it kind of looks to me like, would you say that that ring of bubbles around it has a little bit of like a pinkish highlight?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. So smell it again and tell me if you smell bubble gum.
Um, a little bit, maybe a
Maybe a
little
little.
bit. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now go ahead and taste the wine,
Okay.
and then
What's
go
the
back.
proper way to taste it? Like, how do I want to do it?
So pour it in again, like draw in air as you're drinking it. Like leave a little
Okay.
room for air to come in at the same time. Let the wine hit every part of your palate,
Hmm.
and then document how it feels in the different surfaces of your mouth. Document whether you feel like you're getting alcohol vapor from it, and then pay attention right under your tongue to how much your mouth waters.
Okay.
All right. So, do you get any of that alcohol warmth?
Not really.
Okay, so it's probably moderate in alcohol, I would
Okay.
guess.
Yeah.
Do you get a lot of tannins?
Not really. No.
Okay, so probably low to medium tannins.
Hmm.
And then how much acidity do you feel like it has? How much is your mouth watering?
I think I would say I don't necessarily know what high is, but I would say that it's pretty good on the acidity.
Okay,
Hmm.
cool. And then do you feel that your observation that it's really like cherry driven and there's not a whole lot else going on with it?
Can I try it again? And
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. It's all you at this point.
I would say yes, definitely on that, but maybe a little black fruit too.
Okay, a little black fruit.
Yeah,
Um, is the finish long or does it seem a little shorter?
a little shorter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm gleaning from this wine is that it's younger. It's
Hmm.
probably it's New World, but could be Old World. And then based on the color that I see in your glass, I can eliminate grapes like Pinot Noir, like Nebbiolo, like
Hmm.
Tempranillo, like Sangiovese, all
Okay.
which would have a little more reddish tinge to them.
Hmm.
The fact that I see that little pink highlight around the rim,
Yeah.
um, and this is why I asked you about the bubblegum thing. That suggests to me that the wine might have undergone, at least partially undergone, carbonic fermentation.
Okay.
And then the fact that it's really fruity and primary and has decent acidity but is low in tannin would all kind of support that idea as well.
Okay.
Do you feel like the wine would be good if it was thrown in the refrigerator for a little while?
Um. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Although I think this is the proper temperature. It seems like
Yeah. Okay.
for it. I think if it was chilled a little bit, I think it would still be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then you're holding out on that. There's not a lot of new oak on the wine.
No. No. And
Okay.
usually that's one of the things I can pick up on that I don't get here at all.
So it's really funny that you asked me about the wines that I had in my exam. Like I'm arriving at a very similar conclusion that I had in my certified sommelier exam. Like I feel like the wine in your hand could be a Beaujolais based on what you've described to me.
Okay.
So the fact that it is lower in oak, that it has decent acidity, that it's super fruity, that it could potentially have carbonic fermentation. Um, if the wine is a classic wine and there's a certain list of 40 something wines that you could end up with in an exam and in a blind tasting,
Yeah.
then I would be leaning towards Beaujolais. My outside guess would be potentially a Malbec,
Okay.
um, because of the fact that like the way that that it looks in the glass and that it is drinking with moderate acidity and pretty mild tannins. Without tasting the wine, I would think that that's possible. However, if it was Malbec, I still would expect at least a little evidence of oak. I would expect a
Okay.
little more blue fruit and black fruit than what you described. Other possibilities could be it could be Barbera, although I would expect a little more tannins from Barbera.
Okay.
It could be all kinds of wine that we would think of as like table wine, wine that's made just to be drunk, not to be taken overly seriously.
Okay.
The type of wine that you might get out of a carafe if you're, traveling abroad.
Yeah.
I could see that too, just based on what you're describing to me. So that's
Okay.
kind of where I'm at with it.
All right. So, um, I didn't know what it was, and I just asked my wife what it was because I didn't want to ruin it for myself. Okay.
Okay.
So, it is a Barbera.
Okay.
So, which
Sweet.
that's awesome. That you came up with that. I mean, now does that mean I was good at describing it to you and like I helped, or was it more of what you gleaned from just seeing it and going through the exercise?
Both, because what you're telling me about it, I'm able to sort of zone in on a particular price point.
Yeah.
I'm able to zone in on sort of the functionality of the wine.
Yeah.
And there's certain wines that are made to just be delicious and not be taken crazy seriously. I mean, this is the kind of stuff, like I said, I like drinking at home.
Yeah.
This is pizza wine, pizza
Yeah.
burger, but like don't take it too seriously.
Yeah.
Sit on the couch, Netflix and chill, all that stuff. Like this is the kind of stuff I like to buy for myself. And
Yeah.
so what I'm pinning down is not just the flavors and aromas, which admittedly, like I'm relying on your word for. I can't experience them
Sure.
myself,
Yeah.
but the way you're describing the wine, the simplicity of it, the primary qualities of it, the color that I can see in the glass, like that narrows it down quite a
Wow. That was an awesome exercise.
bit.
I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did.
Sweet.
I definitely have a lot of work to do, I guess, before I, you know, uh, get my sommelier, certificate or whatever. But anyway, that was awesome. I really appreciate that because,
Yeah.
I think just some of the things that I picked up from you in how to swirl, like how to smell, like I didn't know any of those things before, so I was doing it all wrong before. Plus, kind of resetting your nose by like smelling your body and then going. It really actually does work. So if you've never done
Mhm.
that, try it. It actually works. So I mean, that was an awesome exercise. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and then another little trick that I've never heard anyone else like officially approve of, but in my experience, if you kind of have doubts about the oak,
Hmm.
and you're evaluating a wine, if you swirl it pretty good, coat as much of the glass as you can, and then drink it or dump it so that there's just whatever wine is clung to the glass left in there. Um, and then go in and smell it, you can get a really clear picture of the oak profile and in an empty glass for some reason. So
Wow.
I don't know the science behind that, but I find that to be true. Like if you're stuck on the barrel aspect of it, you're not sure if it's French or American or if much of it is new or whatever, then that's another trick you can use.
Wow. That's awesome. Hey, Aaron, this has been great. I appreciate it so much. I mean,
Yeah,
your story is fantastic. Just all the things you've been through and that you've done, and I hope one of these days I'll see you over there at Joseph Phelps,
yeah,
so I
please.
so I can learn more from you. So
Yeah, please. Yeah, like you know how to get a hold of me. Let me know when you come this way.
I will. All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Aaron. It's been awesome. Again, I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.
You too.